Once there was an orphan who had a knack for finding lost things. Both his parents had been killed when he was 8 years old. They were swimming in the ocean when it turned wild with waves, and each had tried to save the other from drowning. The boy woke up from a nap on the sand alone. After the tragedy, the community adopted and raised him, and a few years after the deaths of his parents, he began to have a sense of objects even when they weren't visible. This ability continued growing power through his teens, and by his 20s, he was able to actually sniff out lost sunglasses, keys, contact lenses, and sweaters. Stop the video and write it an objective summary. Remember, an objective summary is only the facts. And try to keep your sentence under 10 words. The neighbors discovered his talent accidentally. He was over at Jenny Sugar's house one evening picking her up for a date when Jenny's mother misplaced her hairbrush and was walking around complaining about this. The young man's nose twitched, and he turned slightly towards the kitchen and pointed to the drawer where the spoons and knives were kept. His date burst into laughter. "Now that would be quite a silly place to put the brush," she said, "among all that silverware." And she opened the drawer to make her point. To wave with a knife or brush her hair with a spoon, but when she did, boom, there was the hairbrush, matted with gray curls, sitting astride the fork pile. Stop the video and write an objective summary in the box on your assignment. Jenny's mother kissed the young man on the cheek, but Jenny herself looked at him suspiciously all night long. "You planned all that, didn't you?" she said. "Over dinner. You were trying to impress my mother." "Well, you didn't impress me," she said. He tried to explain himself, but she would hear none of it. And when he drove his car up to her house, she fled before he could even finish saying he'd had a nice time, which was a lie anyway. He went home to his tiny room and thought about the word lonely and how it sounded and looked so lonely, with those two L's in it, each standing tall by itself. Stop the video and write your objective summary in the box. As news spread around the neighborhood about the young man's skills, people reacted two ways. There were the deeply appreciative and the skeptics. The appreciative ones called up the young man regularly. He stopped by on his way to school, find their keys, and they'd give him a homemade muffin. The skeptics called him over too and watched him like a hawk. He'd still find their lost items, but they'd insist it was an elaborate scam and he was doing it all to get attention. "Maybe," declared one woman, waving her index finger in the air, "maybe," she said, "he steals the thing so we think it's lost, moves the item, and then comes over to save it. How do we know it was really lost in the first place? What is going on?" Stop the video and write an objective summary in the box in your assignment. The young man didn't know himself. All he knew was the feeling of a tug, light but insistent, like a child at his sleeve, and that tug would turn him in the right direction and show him where to look. Each object had its own way of inhabiting space and therefore messaging its location. The young man could sense, could smell an object's presence. He did not need to see it to feel where it put its gravity down. As would be expected, items that turned out to be miles away took much harder concentration than the ones that were 2 feet to the left. Stop the video and write your objective summary. When Mrs. Allen's little boy didn't come home one afternoon, that was the most difficult of all. Leonard Allen was 8 years old and usually arrived home from school at 3:05. He had allergies and needed a pill before he went back out to play. That day, by 3:45, a lone Mrs. Allen was a wreck. Her boy rarely got lost. Only once had that happened in the supermarket, but he'd been found quite easily under the produce tables, crying. This walk home from school was a straight line, and Leonard was not a wandering kind. Mrs. Allen was just a regular neighbor, except for one extraordinary fact. Through an inheritance, she was the owner of a gargantuan emerald she called the Green Star. It sat, glass cased, in her kitchen, where everyone could see it because she insisted that it be seen. Sometimes, as a party trick, she'd even cut steak with its beveled edge. Stop the video and write an objective summary in your assignment. On this day, she removed the case off the Green Star and stuck her palms on it. "Where is my boy?" she cried. The Green Star was cold and flat. She ran weeping to her neighbor, who calmly walked her back home. Together, they gave the house a thorough search, and then the neighbor, a believer, recommended calling the young man. Although Mrs. Allen was a skeptic, she thought anything was a worthwhile idea. And when the line picked up, she said in a trembling voice, "You must find my boy." The young man had been just about to go play basketball with his friends. He'd located the basketball in the bathtub. "You lost him?" said the young man. Mrs. Allen began to explain, and then her phone clicked. "One moment, please," she said, and the young man held on. When her voice returned, it was shaking with rage. "He's been kidnapped," she said, "and they want the Green Star." The young man realized then it was Mrs. Allen he was talking to, and nodded. "Oh," he said, "I see. Everyone in town was familiar with Mrs. Allen's Green Star. I'll be right over," he said. "Where do I bring my emerald? How do I get my boy back?" Stop the video and write your objective summary. The woman's voice was too run with tears to respond. In his basketball shorts and shirt, the young man jogged over to Mrs. Allen's house. He was amazed at how the Green Star was all exactly the same shade of green. He had a desire to lick it. By then, Mrs. Allen was in hysterics. "They didn't tell me what to do," she sobbed. "Where do I bring my emerald? How do I get my boy back?" The young man tried to feel the scent of the boy. He asked for a photograph and stared at it. A brown haired kid at his kindergarten graduation, but the young man had only found objects before, and lost objects at that. He'd never found anything or anybody stolen. He wasn't a policeman. Mrs. Allen called the police, and one officer showed up at the door. "Oh, it's the finding guy," the officer said. The young man dipped his head modestly. He turned to his right, to his left, north, south. He got a glimmer of a feeling towards the north and walked out the back door, through the backyard. Night approached, and the sky seemed to grow and deepen in the darkness. "What's his name again?" he called back to Mrs. Allen. "Leonard," she said. He heard the policeman pull out a pad and begin to ask basic questions. He couldn't quite feel him. He felt the air, and he felt the tug inside of the Green Star, an object displaced from its original home in Asia. He felt the tug of the tree in the front yard, which had been uprooted from Virginia to be replanted here. And he felt the tug of his own watch, which was from his uncle. In an attempt to be fatherly, his uncle had insisted he take it, but they both knew the gesture was false. Stop the video and write your objective summary. Maybe the boy was too far away by now. He heard the policeman ask, "What is he wearing?" Mrs. Allen described a blue shirt, and a young man focused in on the blue shirt. He turned off his distractions, and the blue shirt, like a connecting radio station, came calling from the northwest. The young man went walking, and about 14 houses down, he felt the blue shirt shrieking at him, and he walked right into the backyard, through the back door, and sure enough, there were four people watching TV, including the tear stained boy with a runny nose eating a candy bar. The young man scooped up the boy while the others watched. So surprised they did nothing, and one even muttered, "Sorry, man." Stop the video and write your objective summary. For 14 houses back, the young man held Leonard in his arms like a bride. Leonard stopped sneezing and looked up at the stars, and the young man smelled Leonard's hair, rich with the memory of peanut butter. He hoped Leonard would ask him a question, any question, but Leonard was quiet. The young man answered in his head. "Son," he said, and the word rolled around, a marble on a marble floor. "Son," he wanted to say. When he reached Mrs. Allen's door, which was wide open, he walked in with quiet Leonard, and Mrs. Allen promptly burst into tears, and the policeman slunk out the door. She thanked the young man 1,000 times, even offered him the green star, but he refused it. Leonard turned on the TV and curled up on the sofa. The young man walked over and asked him about the program he was watching, but Leonard stuck a thumb in his mouth and didn't respond. Stop the video and write your objective summary. "Feel better," he said softly, tucking the basketball beneath his arm. The young man walked home, shoulders low. In his tiny room, he undressed and lay in bed. Had it been a naked child with nothing on, no shoes, no necklace, no hair bow, no watch, he could not have found it. He lay in bed that night with the trees from other places rustling, and he could feel their confusion. No snow here, not a lot of rain. Where am I? What is wrong with this dirt? Crossing his hands in front of him, he held on to his shoulders. Concentrate hard, he thought. Where are you? Everything felt blank and quiet. He couldn't feel a tug. He squeezed his eyes shut and let the question bubble up. Where did you go? Come find me. I'm over here. Come find me. If he'd listened hard enough, he thought he could hear the waves hitting. Stop the video and write your objective summary. Once you are finished writing your objective summary, find the Submit button in your Canvas assignment and click Submit.